this is the part of our brain that develops first as we're growing up through adolescence and so forth. So if it gets this information, and then later our cognition abilities develop, it's simply this part of the brain basically hijacks our higher functioning reasoning brain. That is at the core of addiction. Now what we're trying to do with recovery, and what has been so successful, specifically with the clients who are using the treatment manual regularly, is that we are trying to strengthen the prefrontal cortex to learn how to manage this. One of the things that clients say to me when they come in, one of the first questions is, can I overcome this? Can I stop this behavior? Absolutely, you can stop the behavior. The word overcome, I use the word you have to learn how to manage this addiction. Because it has already been templated here, we do not have access to this part of the brain consciously as we would like to. The best way to describe it is through this little diagram over here of an iceberg. 85% of an iceberg is underneath the surface of the water. That represents the limbic part of the brain. The 15% which we see above the water, that represents the prefrontal cortex or our cognitive ability. And this is why willpower alone simply doesn't work in overcoming or stopping this addiction. The individuals that I've worked with through the years who struggle with this have made that statement numerous times. I will never do this again. Lord, give me one more chance. I promise I'll stop doing it, over and over again. And many have been through the confession cycle to ecclesiastical leaders, and they feel absolutely wonderful. They feel like $100 when they come out of there. They're free. The secret's out, and they're never going to go back to it again. But shortly thereafter, because they don't understand this concept and how to learn to manage it, it finds its way back in, and then they find themselves acting out, and then the cycle starts all over again. And after an individual goes through this a number of times, they begin to lose hope. They begin to lose the belief and the hope that anything can truly happen. That's generally the point where a client will come into my office and I begin the process of working with them. Through the understanding that they gain through the treatment manual and this information, I have absolutely seen individuals learn how to manage this addiction. But now, another point that I want to make, those who don't understand addiction, who mean well, will say things like, commit to me that you will never ever do this again. I have learned that that's really a very counterproductive thing to say, even though that's what the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to learn how to teach sobriety, absolutely. But to say to someone who's an addict, commit to me that you're never ever going to do that again, or for an addict himself to say, I'm never ever going to do that again, actually is counterproductive, and this is why. Again, this part of the brain, the limbic system, has gotten the message that in order to survive, you need to keep doing this stuff. So, when you say from the prefrontal cortex, stop doing it, this part of the brain interprets it as a threat to survival. And therefore it actually feeds into the process. It's like putting fuel on the fire. So the way that we learn to deal with it and what we teach in treatment and what the manual helps an individual learn is this concept of acceptance and surrender. And this is a hard concept for individuals to get because they want to get rid of this thing once and for all. Have to change the thinking on that because it doesn't work that way. You can't just wish this part of yourself away because it's unconscious and you don't have direct access to it through the prefrontal cortex. The way to learn to deal with it is to accept the fact that the limbic system will simply provide triggers via the environment. When you go out and see things, you can't help the fact that you're going to be triggered by things when you see it. That's normal, that's natural, that's instinctive. Now, so you will know that this part interprets information first, the craving might already begin, and then it transfers to the prefrontal cortex where you start to go, oh, wait a minute, now if I continue down this path, it's going to lead to an eventual slip and so forth. That's what we are striving to do in treatment, is to strengthen this. As a matter of fact, the only thing that we know of that works in helping people learn to maintain sobriety is to strengthen the prefrontal cortex. By accepting the fact that you're triggered by things. It is what it is. You're not a bad person because you're triggered. So many individuals have felt like they have slipped when actually they were just triggered. They've been sober for a while, they're more or less white-knuckling it, they go out into the environment, they see something that triggers them, and then the limbic part of the brain will say, well, you've already slipped. You might as well just continue to do that. And it creates, and then so it kind of, overrides this part of the brain. Something that's very, very powerful is to help individuals recognize what I call the addictive voice. And this is how you'll do it. I will say to you, listen very, very carefully inside your head when I make a statement to you. Okay, never, ever at any time in the future can you look at pornography, masturbate, or do anything secretively sexually at all, ever again. So pause for a minute, and what do you hear? And typically the responses will be, and I'll see this on the individual's faces, a big smile will come across their face. And they'll go, yeah, right. And they'll hear things like, you've said that 100 times before, you'll never be able to do that. And I'll say, you just did it. And they'll say, I just did what? And I said, you just recognized what I call the addictive voice. This part of the brain down here, the addictive voice, the definition of it is any thought or feeling of continued illicit sexual activity. Anytime that you feel that, it's a feeling or a thought, anytime you feel those cravings or a thought to do something illicit that you've committed not to do, you simply go, there it is, it. What I want you to do, and then the interesting thing is that also this part of the brain has had the capacity to hijack the pronoun I. So you say, well, I feel like I just want to go act out. What I want you to do is to add a T to this and say, no, it wants me to do that. I, the true I, the I that understands consequences of family, relationships, and so forth, you don't want to do that because you know the consequences of your behavior. And so, and the other powerful thing about this concept is that this part of the brain, even though it's very, very powerful, instinctive, impulsive, and so forth, simply can't do anything in and of itself. It must get your permission in order to act out, because this part of the brain is the part that works our hands, our feet. It's the part. This part is the part that has to get in and type the words in for a search or go find a movie or something like that. But this is very, very adept at getting the higher functioning self to fulfill its needs. So the recovery process is, first of all, understanding this, that it simply can't make you do it. It is very good at persuading and tricking you into doing it. And it goes, and strengthening this part is simply teaching individuals when they're triggered to play the tape all the way through. Okay, you need to accept the fact that you're triggered. I desire to get on the internet and look at something. There it is. You can't do anything about the fact that you're having those triggers. There's nothing wrong with that. That's normal, instinctive, and natural because it's hooked up there. You've had the experience already. However, now having this knowledge, this part of the brain, you can go, wait a minute, okay, let me think what would happen if I did that. So you think of the acting out. You don't go into details of thinking of the acting out, but the acting out is over, then what? What's it going to be like? Is your spouse going to find out? Do you need to cover your tracks? Do you need to tell your spouse, and so forth? So those are some of the tools that can help the braking system a little bit. Say, no, I don't want to go down there. The thing that I have heard over and over again from the many hours I've spent with individuals struggling this in group therapy, individual sessions, when a slip happens or they act out, I will say to them, did it work this time? Did it solve your problems, and are you satisfied? And every single time the answer is frustration, it's irritation, and they feel sick about what they've done.